to suspend the rule pursuant to Clause 8 of Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1029, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 79, H.R. 1029, a bill to waive the application fee for any special use permit for veterans' special events at war memorials on land administered by the National Park Service in the District of Columbia and its environs, and for other purposes.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device.
California, I inform the House that Mr. Costa will vote yea on H.R. 1029.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Fallon from the great state of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Fallon will vote yes on H.R. 1029.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albios Ceres, I inform the House that Mr. Ceres will vote yes on H.R. 1029. And as the member designated by Mr. Donald Payne, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yes on H.R. 1029.
On this vote, the yeas are 418, the noes are 3, 2/3.
They're open again. Behind you, you got someone. We got to read these. Jacobs of New York.
Mr. Higgins of New Mr. Jacobs of New York votes aye. Ms. Capter of votes aye. Cheney votes aye.
All right, we are closed.
On this vote, the ayes are 421, the noes are 3, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House will be in order. The chair asks all members in the chamber as well as members and staff throughout the Capitol, to rise for a moment of silence in remembrance of the more than 700,000 Americans who have passed away from COVID-19 virus. What do you have next? Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business, the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4089 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 84, H.R. 4089, a bill to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to develop and disseminate best practices for rental companies and dealers to report suspicious behavior to law enforcement agencies at the point of sale of a covered rental vehicle to prevent and mitigate acts of terrorism using motor vehicles and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Cartwright pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Cartwright will vote yea on H.R. 4089.
On this vote, the yeas are 379, the nays are 51, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4369 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 111, H.R. 4369, a bill to amend the 21st Century Cures Act to provide for designation of institutions of higher education that provide research, data, and leadership on continuous manufacturing as national centers of excellence in continuous pharmaceutical manufacturing and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, As the member designated by Mr. Kind of Wisconsin, I inform the House that Mr. Kind of Wisconsin will vote aye on H.R. 4369.
On this vote, the yeas are 368, the nays are 56. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. And without objection, the title is amended.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my.
Will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, I lost my uncle, and the people of my state and this country lost a leader, former Congressman Dale Kildee. Our hearts go out to my Aunt Gail, to my cousins David, Paul, and Laura, who are experiencing the kind of loss that I and so many of us know far too well. He served here for 36 years, and he believed that this place, this Congress, and our government could be a force for good. During that time, he had many legislative accomplishments around education, the environment, things that he cared deeply about. But I think perhaps his greatest contribution was the fact that he served here so long and left with so many friends because he served here with dignity, with kindness to everyone, with respect for everyone, regardless of their position or their point of view. I hope we can remember him for that, and I hope we all take note of that. It's an important message, especially now. He believed that the role of government was to preserve, to protect, to defend, and to enhance human dignity. And his life's a testament to that promise. So I'd ask all present to join us in a moment of silence for my Uncle Dale.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Daniel Joseph Benishek, or as he was better known to those of us in Michigan, Dr. Dan. On Saturday, October the 15th, after a lifetime of service to the 1st District and the state of Michigan, Dr. Dan passed away. Through his dedication to his patients and constituents, Dr. Dan changed the lives of countless Michiganders and was an indispensable part of our entire community. For his decades of service as a doctor, to his 6 years fighting for the 1st District in Congress, he embodied servant leadership and was an ally to all our veterans and all who were blessed to call Michigan's 1st District home. Dr. Dan's passing is a significant loss to our state. Those of us who call Michigan home have each benefited from his life and service and are grateful for the impacts he made. He did make a difference. He loved the outdoors like no one you would believe, and he loved to tell the stories of how his cabin was completely off the grid and he ate what he caught or hunted. He was a man truly of the Upper Peninsula. We all send our deepest condolences to his dear wife, Judy, and the entire Benishek family and all of Team Benishek. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor the memory of Congressman Dr. Dan Benishek.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby remove myself as a co-sponsor from House Congressional Resolution 33.
The removal is accepted.
Thank you very much.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, our sacred right to vote is in jeopardy. Led by the divisive voice of a twice impeached failed former president, 17 states across this nation have enacted 28 laws to make it harder for Americans to vote. Tomorrow, the Senate has the opportunity to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. The pandemic has shown us we can adapt and modernize our elections to reflect the 21st century and our electorate through same-day registration, making Election Day a national holiday, and transparency on dark money and more. Legislators must be the voice of the people and give voice to the people, and our voices are strongest at the ballot box. That is why we must do all we can to ensure equal access for all Americans. I urge the senators to vote yes on the Freedom to Vote Act. Our republic can't afford anything less. We are voted for by the people, and we must protect the right to vote for the people. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Mr. Jacob Davis Jr. of Pierce County, Georgia, for his 100th birthday on October 6th. A lifelong resident of Georgia's 1st Congressional District, Jacob has devoted his life to his community and his country. He was drafted into the United States Navy in 1943 and was stationed in Great Lakes, Illinois. He served as a fireman on an aircraft carrier that performed test flights for the military. After being discharged from the military in December of 1945, Jacob returned to his family farm and married the love of his life, Jenny Henderson. Over Jacob's lifetime of farming, he has accumulated over 1,000 acres of farmland. To this day, he continues his work on his pecan orchard. If the sun is shining, Jacob can be found outside working. Although he has worked hard his entire life, Jacob was and continues to be a devoted and loving father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. I'm proud to rise today to recognize Jacob's birthday and his lifetime of service and leadership to Georgia's 1st Congressional District. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I request 1 minute revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today to honor Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayburn and his deputies. Earlier this month, Sheriff Wayburn announced the weeks-long investigation known as Operation Buyer Beware, which focused on the demand driving human trafficking. Together, Texas DPS, Fort Worth Police, Arlington Police, and the Department of Homeland Security successfully arrested a total of 115 men over the course of 1 week, many of them repeat offenders. Those arrested were attempting to solicit sex from minors. With this operation, the Tarrant County Sheriff has sent a clear signal to offenders in the community that the safety and well-being of our children is paramount, and acts of harm and violence will not be tolerated. The Sheriff's Department stepped up to make use of the recent changes to state law that will increase jail time for solicitation. We applaud our law enforcement and those dedicated to keeping Texas 24 safe. Thank you, Sheriff Bill Wayburn and Tarrant County law enforcement, for executing this operation and making strides to protect our community. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak for 1 minute, please.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise this evening to call attention to the needs of our Great Lakes region, including communities I represent like Lorain, Ohio, which my colleagues on the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth visited yesterday afternoon on a bipartisan basis. During the hearing, we heard from union members, the business community, community leaders, and local officials about how decades of underinvestment and outsourcing have devastated our region. 10,000 steel jobs gone just in that industry. As we advance our Build Back Better agenda, it is vital we deliver robust resources and support to these communities, ones that too often have been left behind. These historic investments in infrastructure and good-paying jobs must reach every corner of our nation, especially those where middle-class workers and their families have been denied full participation in the American dream. Let's make sure that these communities and those in the Great Lakes receive their fair share and are set upon a path for a more prosperous tomorrow. Thank you, and I yield back.
On what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Staff Sergeant Paul Lincoln Olmsted, who passed away on September 21st, 2021. Born with an instinct to protect and defend others, Lincoln embodied the Green Beret motto, De oppresso liber, or to free the oppressed. He served as a Special Forces engineer in the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group. This elite group of operators serves as the tip of the spear of the greatest fighting force the world has ever known. Just 5 years into his service, Sergeant Olmsted had become a Green Beret and a Special Forces sniper. He will always be known as a disciplined professional with a steadfast commitment to the mission at hand. He proudly served his country, and we owe him our deepest gratitude. He will be remembered as a loving husband to his wife, Danae, and a dedicated father to his son, Tavian, and daughter, Alexa.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, tonight we're going to hear the truth about a truly bad bill. Biden's failed leadership has created America where grocery stores shelves are empty, gas stations are running out of gas, and crime is skyrocketing, our schools are failing, and our borders are wide open so that our cartels can have complete control of what's going on at our southern border. This isn't the American any of us want. Whether we succeed or fail, we do it as one. Republican or Democrat, our future is the same. That's why it's so important to point out the truth of what's in this reconciliation package. The Biden administration has ignored crisis after crisis after crisis, putting all their eggs into this Build Back Broke basket. So how come no one actually knows what's in it? We spent over 40 hours in Ways and Means marking up the Build Back Broke plan last month, and several other committees did the same. But we already know that the policies have changed since then. Democrats are adding radical, unnecessary provisions while the American people aren't looking. For example, they're trying to make the IRS spy on American families' bank accounts. That's right. They want banks to give information to the IRS on any transaction over $600. This is a giant step towards living in a surveillance state. My constituents are horrified at what's happened to our country in just 9 months of Democrat control. They're worried that the freedoms we've held dear for the last 245 years will be stripped away right before their eyes. Tonight, we will hear from my colleagues about the dangerous provisions included in the Build Back Broke plan, the honest truth about what our Democrat colleagues are trying to hide from the American people. And I'd first like to recognize my dear friend, a freshman from Tennessee's 1st District, a fellow business person, a person that I co-authored an op-ed yesterday about our failing supply chain, my dear friend Diana Harshberger.
Thank you, Kevin. Is the microphone on? Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to condemn the reckless and irresponsible proposed spending by the radical left. This reconciliation bill is nothing more than a socialist wish list. It disincentivizes people from working and it's littered with Green New Deal items we cannot afford. The Biden administration has outrageously claimed this bill costs zero. Nada, nothing, zilch. If you believe that, then I've got a nice piece of oceanfront property to sell you in East Tennessee where I come from. This deficit spending is the wrong prescription for our country. Instead of calling this the Build Back Better, they should call it the Build Back Broke. It would raise inflation. You have to remember, inflation is taxation, making everyday necessities even more expensive than they've already become under the Biden economy. That is, if you can even get the items you need due to the supply chain disruptions. And it will fail to incentivize Americans to get back to work. What we need to focus on are real solutions to restarting our great American economy, not on increasing debt and government reliance. I urge my colleagues in joining me in opposing this out-of-control spending. Our country's future depends on it, and the future of East Tennessee depends on it. And I yield back.
Thank you, Diana. I'd like to now yield 2 minutes to my dear friend from Pennsylvania, Dr. John Joyce, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and a fellow classmate.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for hosting this special order this evening. The reconciliation package that my colleagues are pushing for may play well to focus groups in liberal cities, but in Pennsylvania, the energy policies being introduced in this legislation would be a death sentence for the thousands of family-sustaining jobs. It is clear that this administration is openly hostile to the energy industries that are critical in our state and that provide baseload power that our nation relies on. At a time when gas prices just reached a 7-year high, this legislation would create new taxes on the oil and natural gas industries. These regressive taxes would directly harm our middle-class citizens. They would harm the rural Americans who have to drive further distances and take longer commutes in order to get to work. This administration claims these taxes would pay to support working families. That is false. In reality, these taxes would pay to enact radical policies like creating green workforce tax credits that cost over $10 billion. These taxes would pay to give kickbacks to liberal companies that promote the false solutions offered by the Green New Deal energy agenda. Let's be clear. These taxes do not benefit the American people. This administration is willing to raise taxes on working Americans for the sake of their socialist energy policies. This is not responsible government. It is not a government that is working to improve the quality of life for all citizens. It is disappointing to see the administration lying about what this legislation does. This bill would bankrupt our energy producers and send prices soaring even higher. This legislation would not help to build our economy. It would not help to build our workforce, and it would not protect the American energy consumers. The truth is simple. We cannot afford this legislation. We must vote against it. I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for organizing this special order, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the congressman from Florida's 19th District.
He will no doubt be in a far worse, 3 times more expensive than anyone thought needed. This and other erroneous policies set the stage for the havoc infecting our
Congress, our Congress has been up to while our economy has tanked. Instead of trying to jam through trillions of dollars in the backs of American taxpayers, Democrats need to clean up this messy economy. Crucial shipping ports along our coast don't have enough.
Taxpayers will subsidize union dues. Unions will be able to funnel billions of dollars to Democrat organizations. So, in addition to this
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania. I'd now like to yield to
This is not responsible government. Prices soaring even higher. This legislation would not help to build our economy. It would not help to build our workforce, and it would not protect the American energy consumers. The truth is simple. We cannot afford this legislation. We must vote against it. I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for organizing this special order, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the congressman from Florida's 19th District, a new freshman, certainly not shy about getting out there and getting his feet wet and getting after here. So we really appreciate that. And my colleague, Byron Donalds.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Hearn. Thank you for the opportunity. Madam Speaker, it's important that we're here this evening because the President of the United States and the majority party has never actually talked about what's in this bill. They like to throw out, their catchphrase, Build Back Better. They like to talk about how they're going to be helping the children and helping our economy transform. But what they never talk about is what they're actually going to do. What the American people don't know, Madam Speaker, is that in this bill is a $1.3 billion provision to give newspapers $12,500 per employee for local newspapers all across the United States. I don't know about you, but I don't know how that helps anybody build back better when we're giving tax dollars to newspapers. In this bill, it gives $42 billion in tax credits to the rich to buy electric cars. The reason why there are tax credits for the rich is because working families, middle-class families, don't have the disposable income to buy electrical cars. Only the wealthy buy them, but that's in this bill. The administration wants to give the IRS access to your checking accounts. This is outrageous. This completely eliminates due process. It makes every American guilty until proven innocent, and the White House wants this provision in the bill because they can't tax the American people enough to pay for all their radical spending, so they have to go find every piece of change in the couch cushions. The only time in American history we unleashed the IRS on checking accounts and on bank accounts was when we allowed for currency transaction reports to track drug cartels and businesses breaking the law from laundering money in the United States because of drugs and terrorism. That is when we unleashed currency transaction reports on transactions in the United States. It's never been done in any other time, but Joe Biden wants to do it to every American. And make no mistakes, America, it is to every American. In this bill, it raises taxes radically in our corporate sector, makes us the highest corporate tax income country in the world, higher than China. China, the country that is our economic rival, and it raises those taxes. It makes us less competitive, but that's supposed to help us build back better. And let's talk about spending. Because in this very bill, one of the key proponents that Joe Biden and the Democrats want is to expand and continue the child tax credit, which pays $300 per child. But what they'll never tell you is there is no provision in the bill to actually track based upon Social Security numbers to make sure that even if you're going to give a benefit, which by the way we should not give, that anybody in the United States can get it. And I stress anybody in the United States, because by the end of this year, there'll be easily 2.3 to 2.5 million people who have crossed our borders illegally. This bill is a catastrophe. This bill spends far more money than we possibly have. It will create more, and I stress more, inflation in our society, which is already crippling poor people. It is already crippling working families. It is not going to help our country. You know, back in February, when we told the administration do not extend federal unemployment benefits because it was going to pay people to stay home, Joe Biden said, no, it won't. Everything's going to be A-OK. Well, look at our economy today. Everything is not okay. Everything is screwed. And if we listen to Joe Biden, somebody who, frankly, who's never been right, somebody who's never had a job one day in his life, about what it's going to take to actually allow our economy to thrive and prosper, our country is going to see its last great days. Madam Speaker, the reason why you guys can't get the votes is because even Democrats in your own party realize how destructive this will be to the small business owners in their districts, how destructive this will be to the economic vitality of the people in their districts. You can't get the votes. It's time to stand down. This bill is a disaster, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Florida. I'd now like to recognize my dear friend from the Food, Fuel, and Fiber District of West Texas, Texas 19th District, Mr. Jody Arrington.
I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma, and he almost got there. The food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world in West Texas. But we're proud to be partners with our friends in Oklahoma who produce a little oil and gas and a little food and fiber themselves. But the gentleman from Florida is exactly right. I don't think that there's enough Democrats to support this gargantuan tax and spend bill on the American people because it would be their political death warrant, quite frankly, because they represent people, working families who will no doubt feel the burden. Even the most liberal tax policy experts say that the corporate taxes in large part will be borne by working families with lower wages and higher cost of goods and lower benefits. That's what taxing American job creators will do, as well as run those jobs right back overseas where we brought millions back when we cut taxes. We will ruin Taxpayers will subsidize union dues. Unions will be able to funnel billions of dollars to Democrat organizations. So in addition to this, the progressive wish list part 2 after quote unquote COVID relief, in addition to amnesty and citizenship for people who came into this country illegally, they've got a whole list of goodies for their union buddies and bosses, not the least of which is Americans get a higher tax break if they buy their electric bicycles and electric vehicles from unionized corporations. So this is a parade of horrible policies. It is an economic disaster. And as we unpack it, I hope and pray that the American people and our colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle will do the right thing for our country and keep America in that pole position for future prosperity. Thank you, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from the Food, Fuel, and Fiber capital of the world. Appreciate it very much. Now I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the congressman from Tennessee's 2nd District, also spent time in the Tennessee State House, the Tennessee State Senate, and the mayor of Knox County, my dear friend who I served on the Small Business Committee with, and I fighter for real America, Tim Burchett.
Thank you, Chairman Hearn, for that wonderful and accurate introduction. Thank you for being my friend. Madam Speaker, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and the far-left Democrats are playing the American people for fools. They're claiming their insane multi-trillion-dollar agenda will cost nothing. Nothing. Our constituents are not stupid, Madam Speaker. They know nothing Washington puts out is free. And they know that the dadgum Democrats want to tax them for their socialist scheme. Earlier today, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office confirmed Democrats are lying about the cost of Biden's agenda. The CBO found that the health care provisions alone would increase the federal deficit by $500 billion. Let me repeat that, $500 billion. It doesn't matter if the health care spending in this bill occurs over 1 year or over 10 years. We never should blow up the deficit like this, Madam Speaker. On top of the actual health care costs, the CBO also revealed that health care policies would force millions of Americans into a one-size-fits-all government health care program. Forget about keeping your employer-sponsored plan or personalized care. Under progressive care, as we like to call it in my office, Americans will get to rely on the slow-moving federal bureaucracy for meeting their health care needs. Democrats have fought amongst each other for months over this big government boondoggle, Madam Speaker. The American public now knows what the Democrat-controlled Congress has been up to while our economy has tanked. Instead of trying to jam through trillions of dollars in the backs of American taxpayers, Democrats need to clean up this messy economy. Crucial shipping ports along our coast don't have enough staff to maintain normal operating hours, creating a broken supply chain. I saw today where Florida, in fact, is in the market for that prestigious market. Some retail shelves have sat empty for weeks. Things have gotten so bad there that it is talk that some goods will not be available for the holiday season. Lacking supplies of certain goods have made the inflation crisis President Biden started even worse. Skyrocketing prices are a direct result of the blue state stimulus package Democrats passed back in March, another bill that cost trillions of dollars, Madam Speaker. Thanks to that legislation, too many folks are getting paid more to stay at home instead of going to work, which is contributing to our current supply chain woes. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and this Democrat-controlled Congress are guiding our economy straight into the ground. Time and time again, Congress has proved throwing money at the country's problems always makes the situation worse. It already happened once this year. It's time for Congress to abandon this big government socialism agenda before it is too late to save our economy. As I said at the beginning, our constituents are not stupid. They know they're the ones who always pay, either through inflation or taxes. Americans will not forget it was Democrats, driven by the far-left political agendas, who destroyed this economy. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Tennessee. Appreciate you so much, as always. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes from a fellow colleague from Pennsylvania's 9th District. Gentleman that's been in business his entire life. His family's been in business their entire life, and been on the receiving end of these failed past policies when you go after small business. And so I think he is what I consider to be an expert in this area to talk to this. And he and I spent 2 years together on the Small Business Committee. My dear friend, Dan Muser.
Well, I thank my very good friend, the gentleman, Mr. Hearn of the great state of Oklahoma, for yielding some time to me this evening. Madam Speaker, last year we collectively spent $5.6 trillion of the American taxpayer money for COVID relief and recovery and to create a vaccine, all the while enormously increasing our debt, but we were in a serious pandemic, a serious crisis. Despite the effectiveness of this relief, the improving GDP and productivity taking place in our economy, the Biden administration and the Democrat caucus passed the so-called rescue bill that was about 3 times more expensive than anyone thought needed. This and other erroneous policies set the stage for the havoc infecting our economy today. We have a serious workforce shortage, hyperinflation, high demand, and low supply. Strong consumer purchasing, but no made-in-the-USA goods to fulfill that demand. This is the primary cause of the supply chain bottleneck at our ports. Add to it this administration's not-so-subtle attack on domestic energy production, and you have shortages and inflation not seen since the 1970s. Worse, it's not the high earners or the well-off who are suffering from the Biden administration's decisions. It's middle-income, working families with small businesses that are feeling the brunt of these ill-conceived ideas. Small businesses, Madam Speaker, in Pennsylvania are breathless with anxiety and concern. Literally, every day I have the phone call with breathless constituents. They are rattled. Every one of them has a help wanted sign hanging on their door, often offering $20 an hour plus, while the cost of everything goes up daily. What's the Biden administration's and the progressives in this House answer? Let's spend $3.5 trillion on programs that create more demand but do nothing to increase productivity and the supply of American-made goods, and then somehow call it Building Back Better. I would think it would be called Breaking Backs Better, because that's what it's doing, Madam Speaker, breaking the backs of hardworking Americans. Madam Speaker, this defines the Biden administration and the Democratic caucus's economic strategy. Big taxes, big spending, big government. My constituents and I call it economic madness. We must defeat, not reduce, but defeat this economy-wrecking conciliation. I yield back.
I'd like to thank my colleague from Pennsylvania. And now I'd like to yield 2 minutes from a man that has a tremendous passion in this area, who has spent a lifetime in business, a family a lifetime in business. I served with him on the Ways and Means Committee, a gentleman who also played football at Notre Dame.
Yes, yeah.
My dear friend, Mike Kelly.
And I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma, and we do sit in Ways and Means together. And I just think that where we look at today, I've heard so much in the last couple of weeks about looking at this as kitchen table economics. We said, okay, if you want to talk about it in real terms, that every single American would understand, people who actually do their bills at their kitchen table, that figure out what their future looks like at their kitchen table, then we need to start talking in terms that they understand, Madam Speaker. So when we talk about what America gains in revenues, what this federal government gains in revenues each year, it's $3.5 trillion. This federal government spends $6.5 trillion. Now people say, well, that's not too bad. That's only $3 trillion difference. But what it comes down to, if you want to use kitchen table economics, let's talk about what it means to people who actually sit at a kitchen table, sometimes work 2 jobs, sometimes not only the father but the mother get up and go to work every day in order to put food on the table and put a roof over the head of their children and plan for the future. Let's talk about kitchen table economics, and let's reduce it down to terms that people actually understand. A person making $35,000 a year thinks it's okay to spend $65,000 a year. Nobody with any type of economic sense or common sense would say, I think that's okay. I think that's the way I should live my life. I think that's the way I should plan for the future, because I think it's going to be really great for my kids and my grandkids going forward. $3.5 trillion in revenue from taxpayers. The government is spending $6.5 trillion. That's a difference of $30 trillion a year for the average person on their kitchen table. That's spending $30,000 more a year than they bring in. That is lunacy. Nobody would tell their sons or daughters to plan their life that way. Now, the reason I brought this picture of this iceberg is because I believe America right now is facing a Titanic moment. Because the truth of the matter is, we can't really see what our total debt is. It's below the surface. Funded and unfunded liabilities right now, which the American taxpayer is responsible for, is $130 trillion. It is truly a Titanic moment. We are steaming towards an iceberg that is going to sink the ship. We sit back and we talk about these things in terms that don't really matter. We talk about tree equity. We talk about this equity and that equity. What we don't talk about is the equity to hardworking American taxpayers. We don't talk the truth to them, and we hope that we'll pass a bill that they can't possibly imagine and can't possibly be paid for by only those making $400,000 or more a year. The constituents that I represent in Pennsylvania's 16th Congressional District know what it's like when they go to get a gallon of gas. They know what it's like when they have to heat their home this winter and know that it's probably going to be 50 to 60% more this winter than it was last winter. Their gas, their groceries, everything that they consume is going up at a rate that they can't possibly imagine. And they can't imagine it because they're not being told the truth. We're talking we're going to build it back better. We are going to ruin the greatest nation the world has ever known by unsustainable spending and by an administration that fails to tell the whole truth and what's below the surface and what is going to sink the ship. The tip of the iceberg is the only thing the American people see right now. The truth lies below the surface. Getting the truth out is almost impossible, especially in this House, in the people's house, on this floor. Madam Speaker, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you're busy reading something there, but perhaps you ought to read that bill. You ought to see exactly what's being proposed. I don't believe the majority has read that bill. I don't believe the majority really believes in that bill, but I do, the majority will continue to keep their head down, read their phones, read their cards, and listen to a false narrative coming out of the White House and a complicit media that refuse to tell America the truth. We are at a titanic moment. We are facing debt we cannot possibly sustain. We are taking ourselves out of a position to be the strongest country in the world, and we are doing it right here on the People's House. We are discussing taxes and cost of living that are off the charts that we have never seen in our life before. And we continue to read our phones, read the teleprompter, and whisper to people, just pay your fair share. Really? Really? And is that the way we're going to run it? And is that the way we're going to go forward? And are we going to go home to our home districts and say, look, you're just going to have to pay your fair share? That's all we're going to keep telling. We will whisper our way through this crisis, and it will end up as a disaster. How anybody can sit on the floor of this House representing their home district, and 750,000 people is what most of us represent, and go back home and tell them, I did what was right for you. Never before has this country ever faced the crisis it's facing now. And it's not because of a foreign power. It's not because of somebody trying to take us over. It is the rotting that's taking place right inside this House in this session. I would implore every single member of the House. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a liberal or if you're a conservative. Just stop being stupid. Because there ain't no fixing stupid. And the path we are on right now is a complete disaster. Everybody knows it. Not everybody speaks it because they just don't want to break ranks. This is the Titanic moment. This is where America's facing. And I would implore each member of this House to wake up and do what's right for the American people. And with that, I yield back. I thank the gentleman.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania and his passion in this subject. And now I'd like to yield 2 minutes to a fellow baseball player, a man from Utah's 1st Congressional District who had the distinction of hitting an in-the-park home run at our big win 2 weeks ago. So really appreciate that. Congressman Blake Moore.
Important distinction. Thank you, Representative Hearn. Madam Speaker, I rise to highlight one specific danger of the Democrats' $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. My colleagues have highlighted many concerns, many issues that this tax and spend monstrosity and how it will advance partisan priorities like taxpayer-funded abortions, the Green New Deal, a $2.1 trillion tax increase on businesses and hardworking American families. But the provision that I'm speaking of specifically threatens our individual freedoms and personal privacy. This provision is an expansive IRS mandate that would give the government unprecedented access into our wallets and spending patterns. This provision would force our neighborhood banks and local credit unions to hand over constituents' private financial information directly to the IRS. This decree levies an outrageous compliance cost on the credit unions and banks that serve my community. meaning higher fees and lower saving yields for first district families. But more importantly, this intrusion into our transaction poses extraordinary privacy concerns and subjects Utahns' financial information to hacking, political targeting, and government surveillance. This abusive provision will collect massive amounts of personal financial data on middle-class families. Imagine the ways that any administration, Democrat or Republican, could be tempted to use that information and to intrude on our private businesses and lifestyle choices. Even still, this will not close the tax gap. This provision isn't targeting wealthy tax evaders, as President Biden claims. It's targeting normal, working-class, everyday Americans. $3.5 trillion. And for President Biden to say it's not going to cost us anything, Democrats know they can't tax enough to make up that difference, so they're finding these unique, obscure ways to employ or to basically deploy the IRS on everyday working Americans in their regular checking accounts. I condemn this unconstitutional and invasive federal overreach, and I stand with Utah families who depend on the security and privacy that their financial institutions provide. I encourage my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to oppose this provision, and I look forward to voting against the entirety of Speaker Pelosi's reconciliation package. Thank you, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank my colleague. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the Congressman from Wisconsin's 6th District, serves on the Budget Committee, and advocate for workforce development and welfare reform, Congressman Grothman.
Well, I hope the American public is paying attention as we have 3 bills moving through here, including the reconciliation bill. In the year that we just finished, which included some supposedly once-in-a-lifetime COVID spending bills, 41% of the money spent by the government was borrowed. President Biden has laid out his dream for what will happen in fiscal year 2022, and now that we're back to normal, he still is borrowing 31% of the budget. Think about that. That'd be like saying, if you're making $60,000 a year, next year I'm going to spend $90,000 a year. The top line numbers on this are just unbelievable. And these numbers are without taking into account the almost certain increases in interest rates that we are going to have to pay on our federal debt. I would say there's so many horrible parts of this bill, but I think the most dangerous part is, in addition to not funding the southern border, there are provisions in here clearly designed to have a dramatic increase in the number of illegal immigrants, which will turn into legal citizens. Right now, America is used to having about 800,000 people a year sworn as new citizens. But pro-immigration groups suggest that this bill will add in one shot over 10 million new immigrants. Just disastrous. Among other carrots to get more immigrants here, we are giving away free Pell Grants, which is to say free scholarships, if you come here illegally. That's almost hard to believe. At the time that the average American middle-class kid is paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt to get his college degree, and it's going to wind up in debt into his 40s, if you come here illegally under this crazy bill, we're going to give you free college. Unbelievable. Permanently changing America to say the government should take care of 3- and 4-year-olds when there's no evidence or scant evidence that this will improve the outcomes for American children in their education system. All you're doing is, I think, following an absolute horrible ideology that says that the government ought to be the ones taking care of the children. As far as families are concerned, increasing the marriage penalty, be it increasing the marriage penalty for the earned income tax credit, increasing the marriage penalty on Pell Grants, putting out more low-income housing, which is also designed to break down the families and further erode the stability of future generations. I strongly urge my colleagues to vote no on the massive increase in the number of citizens here, the massive increase in the role the government plays in American life, and begin to restore themselves to some fiscal competence. Thank you very much for yielding the time to me.
I'd like to thank my colleague from Wisconsin. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to a new freshman from Alabama's 1st Congressional District, a fellow small business owner, Jerry Carl.
Thank you, sir. Madam Speaker, I rise today to object to this ridiculous, wasteful spending that my colleagues from across the aisle are trying to ram through this proposed $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. We have real needs in this country, but instead of addressing them, the Democrats are attempting to spend somewhere around $3.5 trillion on social programs, Green New Deal mandates, and all kind of junk that adds up. If you were to take if you were to take and stack up $3.5 trillion in $1 bills, you would have a total of 250,000 miles of bills. That's how tall it would be. This is unacceptable. It's totally ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd to consider spending that much money in an area that we are just beginning to get involved in, which is green energy. It would be one of those things, if money was going to actually improve this country in a massive way, you might see some support from the Republican side. You might even see some of your own Democrats coming back to your own party. But as we all know, there's things in this bill that are horrible. I want to just mention 3 of them very briefly. One, we're throwing trillions of dollars at this ridiculous green new mandate. We're going to mandate things on corporations and on people they cannot afford. We're going to break the back of small businesses. It's coming. 2, we're spending billions of dollars to expand the numbers in the IRS. 88,000 new IRS agents. Now, those agents aren't going to separate us from being Democrats or Republicans. All they're looking at is a dollar figure. And Madam Speaker, I propose to you there's going to be some blowback on that. You're giving them the right to spy on every American in this country, and that's wrong. It's wrong. We shouldn't fear our government. We shouldn't fear the IRS. They should fear us because we are the taxpayer. We are the people. And 3, it will direct taxpayers' dollars directly to perform and to promote abortion. Never has that ever been done in this country before. That's going to be a name changer. Madam Speaker, I suggest to you there's a tsunami coming up in 2022 because the American people are upset. This bill will also increase taxes, the cost of living every day on hardworking Americans, and again, this is unacceptable. We're nearly $30 trillion in debt. Inflation has risen every month that President Biden has been in office. And Americans across this country are seeing the cost of living skyrocket. In my small community, I'm looking at gas $1 more a gallon. You can't reach in the hardworking American's pocket without filling their gas money. And when they have to give $1 more a gallon, they're going to remember that. Let me just remind my colleagues from across the aisle, the American people are fed up with this foolishness. And I promise you, they will remember in 2022. That tsunami's coming. I've spent a lot of time trying to make a lot of friends on the Democrat side. I think it's extremely important for this House to work together, not against one another. But if you follow this administration off this cliff, there's no return. The American people are going to turn on us. Turn on the people that voted for it, I should say. It's time to get serious about fiscal responsibility and learn to live within our means. Or is it too late? Our children, our grandchildren deserve better than this. And I will not stand by and watch this country be mortgaged for the future. Washington has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. We collect plenty of money. It's just how we spend it. And we've got to learn to cut back. It is reckless and irresponsible for this body to continue throwing trillions of dollars around like there's nothing to it. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to oppose this terrible $3.5 trillion rec bill, as I love to call it. Thank you, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Alabama. I'd now like to recognize the gentleman from Texas 21st District, a man that has extraordinary passion about constitutional accountability and fiscal responsibility, my dear friend Chip Roy.
I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma, and no ill will about what happened in the Cotton Bowl last week. But I will say that on the floor of the House of Representatives last week, I was entertained by listening to the majority leader brag about voting 49 times to raise the debt ceiling in his career. The debt going up from $1 trillion to now $28.5 trillion. And what do my illustrious colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to do now? Throw another $3.5 trillion on top of massive inflation, people getting paid not to work, an economy getting absolutely crushed, and that is where our Democratic colleagues want to take us. But the thing is, it's not about the $28.5 trillion. That's horrible. Undermining the dollar, undermining our economy, racking up debt, printing money, making us weak compared to China. But it really isn't that. It's that my Democratic colleagues want to spend that money to come after you, the American people. That is what that money is for. It's to go after the American people. It's to fund the FBI to go after parents at school boards. A school board where this summer a dad went to talk to the school board and exercises his First Amendment rights because his daughter was raped in a bathroom. And what do the illustrious geniuses of the Loudoun County School Board do? What do the school board administration across this country do? The association, they say we should call them domestic terrorists. What does the Biden administration do? Come out and say we're going to fund the Department of Justice. We're going to say we should have people going after parents for speaking at a school board where his little girl, his 9th grade girl, was raped in a bathroom by a dude wearing a skirt. What in the world is happening to our country? But that's what my Democratic colleagues want to do. They want to fund bureaucrats to go after the American people. They want to fund OSHA. They want to give more money to OSHA, increasing the max for OSHA penalty for repeat offenders of violating the president's illegal, unconstitutional vaccine mandate from $70,000 to $700,000, minimum penalty from $5,000 to $50,000, going after businesses who dare say they don't believe it is their role to tell their employees that they must get vaccinated. But in the infinite wisdom of this president, he thinks he has the power to go after the American people. Well, God bless the pilots at Southwest. God bless the employees out there saying no, saying you don't get to do that. But what do my Democratic colleagues want to do? They want to fund more bureaucrats to go after private citizens and private businesses who do not want to bow down to the edict of the President of the United States issuing an unlawful, illegal mandate. They want to fund more federal government restricting rights to work, $835 billion in welfare through the tax code, expand federal government control over local zoning, empowering the IRS, as my colleagues have already eloquently spoke about, and going after your ability to have the energy to fuel your businesses, fuel your homes, and making the American people subject to energy poverty. That's what our Democratic colleagues have in mind. And finally, giving billions of dollars to woke colleges, wealthy liberals, and the rest of the left's political base. That is the direction my Democratic colleagues want to take this country. I think the American people know this is the wrong direction. I urge my colleagues to oppose this disastrous legislation, and I thank the gentleman for yielding time.
I'd like to thank my friend from Texas. I'd now like to recognize another fellow classmate from Indiana's 4th District. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to Congressman Jim Baird, a decorated Vietnam veteran, a person who was recognized with 2 Purple Hearts for the wounds he received in protecting our freedoms. Congressman.
I want to thank you, Kevin, for coordinating this special order, and I thank you for doing that. Madam Speaker, this multi-trillion-dollar big government spending package proposed by the Democrats isn't going to help our country. In fact, it's going to be fundamentally harmful for generations of Americans to come. Right now, America is saddled with skyrocketing inflation rates that have left American families paying more for everything, and supply chain shortages threaten to make the holiday shopping season more difficult and expensive than ever. Democrats are promising a package that will prolong labor shortages and consequently inflation rates by continuing welfare benefits without work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents at a time when there are over 10 million jobs available. How can we resolve labor shortages and rising inflation rates when the Democrats continue to champion policies that encourage people to remain unemployed? Instead of addressing pressing issues that are having a true impact on American families, Democrats continue to push partisan initiatives that are non-starters for many Americans, like mandating that taxpayers fund abortions. This package proves that many Democrats are out of touch with both the needs and the values of the American people, and I'm proud to join my colleagues in standing in opposition to this legislation, and I yield back.
I'd like to thank the gentleman. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the congressman from Florida's 8th District, Bill Posey, but I'd also like to say he serves on Financial Services Committee, which has a big part in the jurisdiction in this bill that we're discussing. But I'd also like to point out the distinction he had in working and serving in Florida's Senate whenever we had the election laws. Much was spoken about that over today and in some of the 1 minutes, but worked in the Florida Senate and helped work on the reform laws to what happened with the 2000 presidential race. And so with that, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my dear friend from Florida.
I thank the gentleman from Oklahoma, Madam Speaker. You know, ironically, it was my bill, the Elections Reform Act of 2001, after the closest presidential election in history, decided by about 350 votes. And my Elections Reform Act, after all that hostility, passed 38 to 2 in the Senate and 120 to zip in the Florida House. And that's how election reform bills should pass. If they don't pass with an overwhelming majority of both sides, they're not fair and they shouldn't be enforced. Americans are feeling the rise in prices at the gas pump and in our grocery stores. Favorite products are in short supply and some are even unavailable. To make matters worse, they're discovering that the resolution before us is full of wasteful spending and big tax increases. The administration only responds to economic crises by making excuses and pointing fingers. Claiming supply chain disruptions and inflation are just high-class problems is incredibly wrong. You can call it what you want on TV, but at the end of the day, it's just plain and simple bad policy. And all this resolution does, that we're asked to vote for, is to greenlight more of it. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
May I ask, thank the gentleman from Florida. Madam Speaker, may I ask how much time we have remaining?
The gentleman has 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I'd like to give one last shout out to Republican Study Committee Chairman Jim Banks. The RSC has been fighting this ridiculous spending from the get-go, and it's largely due to Jim's leadership that so many Americans know just how bad this reconciliation bill really is. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in tonight's special order. We heard really compelling stories from my colleagues about the dangers of Biden's out-of-control socialist spending. Our nation is still recovering from forced lockdowns that killed small businesses across this country and wreaked havoc on the intellectual development of an entire generation of students. Our number one priority should be empowering job creators to grow and succeed, growing their local economies with them. Biden's Build Back Broke plan kills small businesses and increases our reliance on cradle-to-grave welfare systems. I'm a living proof that never-ending handouts simply do not work. They only increase the dependence on a system that will never help individuals become self-sufficient. To quote my favorite president, Ronald Reagan, the greatest social program in the world is a job. We need more people in jobs, not less. All that the Biden administration has to show for 9 months in power is an abysmal unemployment rate and a record high inflation. It's simply not working. It's time to give fiscal responsibility a serious try. Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Utah.
Thank you, Representative Hearn, for leading this entire session and the opportunity to close. Madam Speaker, I rise today at the close of today's session to remember the sacrifice and heroism of Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, who bravely gave his life while defending Abbey Gate from violent extremists in Kabul, Afghanistan on August 26, 2021. After the tragic events of September 11th, 2001, Staff Sergeant Hoover knew he wanted to be a Marine. At the time of his death, Staff Sergeant Hoover had served as a Marine for 11 years and was on his 3rd tour in Afghanistan. In Utah, we have been devastated by this news. On the Sunday after the attacks, I joined hundreds of Utahns gathered at the state capitol for a memorial vigil to honor Staff Sergeant Hoover. I also attended his funeral service before him being laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery and was overwhelmed by the memories shared by his family and friends. He was treasured, loved, and admired, and gave all for our freedoms. Staff Sergeant will rightly be remembered as a hero in the halls of Congress in Utah and across the nation as he served. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the gentleman for the recognition of such heroism. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President. Pursuant to Section 11B of House Resolution 188, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate and noon for legislative business.